Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy daily stories about cheating, revenge, and relationship advice. As I sat in my office, surrounded by the sterile glow of fluorescent lights and the hum of computers, my mind was a tumultuous storm of thoughts. I glanced at the clock, 3:30 p.m. The day had dragged on, and the spreadsheet I was supposed to be analyzing felt like a mountain I couldn't climb. Just then, my phone buzzed with a notification, pulling me from my daze. It was a text from Sarah. Guess what? I'm pregnant. My heart raced. Excitement mixed with anxiety as I stared at the screen, unsure how to process the news. We had talked about starting a family, but the timing felt overwhelming. Part of me was thrilled, this was what we had wanted, but another part of me felt the weight of uncertainty. I responded with a simple, "Wow, that's huge. We need to talk." I hoped to hide my hesitation behind a facade of enthusiasm. The evening came, and Sarah walked in later than usual. She was wearing that light blue dress I loved, but something in her demeanor felt off. Her smile was strained, and she seemed distracted, as if she were miles away. I put my phone down, trying to focus on her. "Hey, you look beautiful," I said, forcing a smile. "Thanks, Mark. Just been a long day," she replied, her voice flat. "Anything happen at work?" I probed, hoping to draw her out. "Just the usual," she said, avoiding my gaze as she rummaged through her bag. I noticed the way her fingers trembled slightly, a detail I hadn't missed before but hadn't paid much attention to until now. Later, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, I found myself lost in thought. The tension was palpable, and I couldn't ignore the nagging doubts. "So, when did you find out?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just this morning," she replied, her eyes darting away. "I wanted to surprise you." "Surprise me? You mean you just went to the doctor without telling me?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "I didn't want to stress you out, Mark. With work and everything," she trailed off, her voice growing quieter. "Sarah, you could have at least told me you were going," I pressed, frustration creeping into my tone. "I thought we were in this together." Her expression hardened. "You think I'm hiding things from you? This is my life too, you know." I wanted to respond, to tell her about the nagging feeling in my gut, but instead, I just nodded, suppressing the urge to dig deeper. As she finished her meal in silence, I couldn't shake the sense that something wasn't right. The next day at the office, I was still reeling from our conversation when Emily approached me during lunch. She could sense my unease. "Hey, Mark, what's up? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her brow furrowed with concern. "It's Sarah. She just told me she's pregnant, but I'm feeling, I don't know, uneasy. She's been acting strange lately." Emily leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "Look, I know this is tough, but have you noticed any signs? Sometimes when women get pregnant, things can change dramatically. It's not unusual for them to feel overwhelmed or for their behavior to shift." "What do you mean, signs?" I asked, my heart racing at the thought of infidelity. "Things like hiding her phone, being secretive about where she goes, spending more time away from home. I'm not saying she's cheating, but if something feels off to you, it's worth keeping an eye on," Emily warned, her tone serious. I felt a chill run down my spine. "You think she's cheating?" I replied, almost incredulous. "Not necessarily, but trust your gut, Mark. If you're feeling uneasy, there's usually a reason. Just, be careful." Her words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and as I chewed my sandwich, I couldn't help but replay moments from the past weeks, Sarah's late nights at work, her vague responses about her day, the strange phone calls I had overheard when she thought I wasn't listening. That night, as I lay in bed beside Sarah, the moonlight streaming through the window, I turned to her and asked, "You've been distant lately. Is everything okay? I just want to know what's going on." She sighed heavily, turning away from me. "I told you, I'm just stressed with the pregnancy and work. Can't you just let it go?" A knot twisted in my stomach. "It's just, I feel like there's more to it. You can talk to me, you know. I don't want to talk about it, Mark, she snapped, her voice rising. You're being paranoid for no reason. I felt a wave of frustration wash over me, mixed with a sense of helplessness. I wanted to believe her, but Emily's warning echoed in my mind. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and no amount of denial would uproot them. I turned away, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts spiraling into a vortex of uncertainty and fear. What if my instincts were right? What if this was just the beginning of the end? The following days were a blur of anxiety and tension. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, each step carefully measured as I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy in my relationship with Sarah. The news of her pregnancy should have filled me with joy, but instead, it only intensified the gnawing doubts I couldn't shake. My mind raced with suspicions, each more frantic than the last. One evening, I returned home from work early, hoping to catch Sarah before she went out again. The house was quiet, save for the sound of the refrigerator humming. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone with an expression that was a mix of concentration and unease. Hey, I said softly, trying to sound casual as I took a seat next to her. You're home early. Yeah, just decided to take a break, she replied, her eyes not leaving the screen. I felt a wave of frustration rise in me. Listen, we need to talk. She glanced at me, the tension palpable in the air. About what? About you and your recent behavior. I can't ignore this feeling I have anymore. You've been disappearing, and it's not just because of work. I need to know what's going on, Sarah. Her demeanor shifted instantly. The relaxed posture straightened, and a frown replaced the slight smile she had. Why do you always have to make everything into a big deal, Mark? I'm pregnant and stressed, that's all it is it? Because it feels like there's more to it, I pressed, the urgency in my voice growing. You're acting like you have something to hide. Sarah's eyes narrowed, and her voice raised in disbelief. Are you seriously accusing me of cheating? This is insane, Mark. You think I would do that to you? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. It's not that I want to think that, but your behavior is raising red flags. You're never around. And when you are, it's like you're a completely different person. Maybe I'm just trying to adjust to the fact that I'm going to be a mother, she shot back, her hands clenching into fists. How can you turn this into an accusation? I can't believe you. I felt a pang of guilt at her words, but the doubt I had simmered beneath the surface. I just want to understand, I said, my tone softening. If you're overwhelmed, you can talk to me about it. But I can't help if you keep shutting you out. That's rich coming from you. You're the one who's been distant, she spat, standing up abruptly. You're too busy with your work to even notice how I feel. I stood too, frustration bubbling to the surface. I'm trying to support you, Sarah. I thought we were in this together, but instead, it feels like I'm chasing after shadows. Maybe you should stop being so paranoid, she exclaimed, her voice trembling with anger. You're ruining this for both of us. As she stormed out of the room, I stood frozen, my heart racing. The very accusations I feared had manifested into a confrontation that left me feeling raw and exposed. I knew I had to get to the bottom of this, but the idea of pushing her further away terrified me. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as my mind replayed our argument. I needed answers. I couldn't keep living with this uncertainty. The next day, I decided to confront my fears head-on. I hired a private investigator, a decision I didn't take lightly but felt necessary. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing my grip on reality, and if Sarah was hiding something, I needed to know. The investigator assured me he would keep everything discreet and would only report back with findings when I was ready. Later that week, I met Emily for coffee, still grappling with the tumult of emotions. Have you talked to her since the fight? Emily asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Not really, I admitted, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. She's been distant. I think I might be losing her. Emily leaned in, her voice low and empathetic. Mark, you have to trust your instincts. If you feel something is off, it usually is. Just be careful, you don't want to push her too far. I know, but I'm scared of what I'll find, I said, looking down at the swirling liquid in my cup. Whatever happens, you'll figure it out. Just take it one step at a time, she reassured me. When I returned home that evening, Sarah was on the phone in the living room, her voice low and hurried. I felt a surge of anxiety as I quietly approached, trying to catch a glimpse of the conversation. She turned suddenly, spotting me, and quickly hung up. Who were you talking to? I asked, my heart racing. Just a friend, she replied, her tone defensive. Just a friend? I repeated incredulously. Since when do you keep your friends a secret? Why do you care? You seem to think I'm hiding everything from you, she snapped, her frustration evident. Maybe because I feel like I don't know you anymore. I shouted, the floodgates of my emotions breaking open. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not. Then maybe you should just leave, she retorted, tears pooling in her eyes. I can't take this constant interrogation. I'm not cheating on you, Mark. I fell silent, the weight of her words crashing over me like a wave. I just want you to be honest with me, I whispered, my voice cracking. That's all I've ever wanted. I'm being honest. You're the one who's not believing me. She turned away, and I could see her shoulders shaking with suppressed emotion. The chasm between us felt insurmountable, and I realized how fragile our connection had become. I didn't want to accuse her anymore, but the doubt was a persistent shadow. That night, as we lay in bed, the silence was deafening. I turned away, haunted by the realization that trust had been shattered, and I had no idea how to piece it back together. The seeds of doubt had taken root, and their tendrils were suffocating any hope of peace I once held. The days dragged on like an agonizingly slow clock, each tick amplifying my anxiety and frustration. I had hired the private investigator, and the uncertainty of waiting for answers gnawed at me. I tried to focus on work, but every conversation with my colleagues felt like a performance, each laugh a reminder of the storm brewing in my personal life. One afternoon, I received a call from the investigator. My heart raced as I answered, a knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach. Mark, I've got some information, he said, his voice steady but serious. Is it about Sarah? I asked, the words barely escaping my lips. Yes, I've been monitoring her movements. She's been meeting with someone regularly. I can send you the details if you'd like. I felt a rush of adrenaline and dread wash over me. Yes, please. I need to know everything. After the call, I paced around my office, anxiety fueling my steps. My mind raced with the possibilities. Who could she be seeing? My gut twisted as dark thoughts flooded in, feeding my fears. That evening, I returned home, my heart pounding as I prepared myself for the conversation I knew was coming. I found Sarah in the kitchen, staring blankly at the counter as she stirred a pot of pasta. The smell of garlic filled the air, a stark contrast to the tension looming between us. Hey, I said cautiously, my voice cutting through the silence. Hey, she replied, her eyes not meeting mine. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. I got some news today. About you. Her body stiffened, and she turned to face me, her expression wary. What do you mean? I hired a private investigator, I said, my heart racing. He's been following you, and he told me you've been meeting someone. Mark, how could you do that? Sarah's voice rose, a mix of anger and hurt flashing across her face. You don't trust me. I needed to know the truth. You've been distant, and I couldn't just sit back and ignore it. I countered, frustration bubbling to the surface. Who is he, Sarah? Who have you been seeing? She shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. You're making a huge mistake. I can't believe you'd go behind my back like this. Then just tell me the truth. If you're not cheating, why are you so defensive? I pressed, desperate for clarity. Sarah's breath hitched, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of vulnerability beneath her anger. Because you're accusing me of something I haven't done. I can't believe you'd think that of me, especially now, with everything that's going on. Then who is it? If there's nothing to hide, just tell me. I pleaded, the frustration coursing through me like electricity. Silence enveloped the room, thick and suffocating. Sarah looked away, biting her lip, and I felt a cold chill settle in the pit of my stomach. I can't, she finally whispered, her voice breaking. You wouldn't understand. Try me, I urged, my voice softening. Please, just tell me. With a trembling hand, she reached for her phone and pulled up a message thread. This is the person I've been seeing. My breath caught in my throat as I read the name, Jake, my former college friend. I felt my heart drop. Jake. The one you said you were close to when I was working late. The one you went to visit a few weekends ago. Yes, but it's not what you think, she exclaimed, her voice rising again. He's just a friend. We've been talking, but I swear, it's nothing more than that. Nothing more. I said incredulously. It sure doesn't look like nothing when you're meeting up with him behind my back. You didn't think I'd find out. I didn't want you to worry, she said, her voice cracking. I thought I could handle everything on my own. I never meant to hurt you, by seeing him in secret. I spat, the anger boiling inside me. How can you say that and expect me to believe you? Because it was just a friendship, Mark. I didn't want to burden you with everything. I'm overwhelmed with the pregnancy, and I thought talking to Jake would help. I shook my head, feeling the weight of betrayal crash down around me. So this was your solution? To confide in him instead of me? Yes. I didn't think it would go this far. It was a mistake to keep it from you, but I promise, I didn't mean for it to become what it is, she insisted, tears spilling down her cheeks. Then why didn't you just tell me? I asked, my voice softer now as I grappled with the reality of her words. If it was so innocent, why keep it hidden? Because I was scared, Mark. Scared of how you would react. I thought if I told you, you'd overreact and it would cause more problems. I didn't want to add to the stress, she confessed, her voice shaking. By lying to me? By sneaking around? I replied, my chest tightening. You should have trusted me enough to be honest. I know. I messed up, but please believe me, there's nothing romantic between us, she cried, her sobs echoing through the kitchen. I stood there, my heart heavy with betrayal and confusion. The truth she had unveiled felt like a knife twisting deeper into the wounds of my trust. I wanted to believe her, to cling to the hope that this was a misunderstanding, but my instincts screamed otherwise. Right now, I don't know what to believe, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You've shattered my trust, Sarah. As the gravity of her actions sank in, I knew this was just the beginning of a long road ahead. I felt lost, grappling with emotions I couldn't fully process. The conversation hung heavy in the air, and I realized that this was a turning point in our relationship. I had to confront not just Sarah, but the truth of our situation, whatever that may be. I need some time to think, I finally said, my voice heavy with the weight of disappointment. I can't do this right now. Mark, please don't walk away, she pleaded, desperation lacing her voice. I'll do anything to fix this. Fix this? I echoed, shaking my head. You can't just fix trust that's been broken. I need to figure out what I want. As I stepped out of the kitchen, the weight of her gaze lingered behind me. I knew I was on the precipice of a decision that would change everything. The courtroom was an imposing place, filled with an air of tension that felt palpable. As I entered, the starkness of the room hit me, white walls, polished wooden benches, and a judge's gavel resting ominously at the front. I glanced around, spotting familiar faces, Sarah's parents, who looked worried and disappointed, and a few friends who had come to support me. My heart raced, knowing that today would determine not just my rights as a father, but the very foundation of my life going forward. I took my seat at the plaintiff's table, my attorney, Claire, shuffling through papers beside me. She was a sharp woman in her mid-30s, her auburn hair pulled back tightly, a testament to her meticulous nature. "Are you ready for this?" Claire asked, her voice low but steady. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready," I replied, the weight of the day pressing down on my chest. The judge entered, and a hush fell over the room. I straightened in my chair, my palms sweaty as I prepared for the confrontation that would reveal the truth. I spotted Sarah at the defendant's table, her face pale and drawn, her eyes darting nervously. I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and pity as I recalled the deceit that had led us to this moment. The judge cleared his throat. "We are here today to address the issue of paternity and claims of fraud in relation to the child currently in question. Let's begin with the plaintiff. Mr. Mark, please state your case." I stood, my heart pounding as I faced the judge. "Your Honor, I stand before you today to seek justice for the deception I have endured. I married Sarah, believing that we would build a family together, and I was thrilled to learn she was pregnant. However, as my doubts grew, I uncovered the truth that shattered my world. I am not the biological father of Sarah's child, and I believe I have been a victim of paternity fraud." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom, and I caught a glimpse of Sarah's face, a mixture of fear and anger flaring in her eyes. "Mr. Mark," the judge interjected, "do you have evidence to support your claims?" "Yes, Your Honor." I gestured toward Claire, who presented the DNA test results, carefully labeled and documented. "This DNA test clearly shows that I am not the biological father of the child." The judge accepted the papers and reviewed them briefly. "Very well. Ms. Sarah, would you like to respond to these claims?" Sarah stood, her voice trembling. "Your Honor, I admit that my actions were wrong, but I never intended to deceive Mark. The relationship I had with Jake was a mistake, and I truly believed I could make it work with Mark after everything. The pregnancy was unexpected, and I was scared. Scared enough to keep the truth from your husband." Claire shot back, her tone sharp. "How can you expect him to believe you when you hid the child's true paternity?" "Because I loved him. I thought that love would be enough to heal our family," Sarah insisted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought I could fix things before he found out." Claire leaned forward, her eyes piercing. "Fix things? By lying to him? You've taken away Mark's choice to be part of this child's life by keeping him in the dark. How can that be love?" "Claire, please," I whispered, sensing the intensity of the situation. I didn't want to turn this into a circus, but I needed the truth to come out. The judge nodded for silence. "Let's focus on the facts, shall we? Ms. Sarah, did you inform Mr. Mark of the potential for paternity issues during your pregnancy?" I didn't think it was necessary," she stammered, glancing at her attorney for support. "Your Honor," Claire interjected again, her voice firm, "this is a classic case of paternity fraud. Mark has every right to seek legal recourse. Sarah's actions have not only deceived him but have also put the child's future in jeopardy. He deserves to know the truth and make decisions accordingly." "Mark, how does this affect your desire to be a father to this child?" the judge asked, shifting the focus back to me. I took a deep breath, the weight of my emotions heavy in my throat. "Your Honor, despite everything that has happened, I still care about that child. But I also need to protect myself and ensure that I'm not legally bound to a child that isn't mine. I deserve that clarity." The judge nodded thoughtfully, scribbling notes. "Let's proceed with the evidence collection and testimonies. I want to hear from both parties before making any decisions." As the testimonies unfolded, I listened to Sarah's friends describe her struggles during the pregnancy and her emotional state, while Claire laid out a timeline of my relationship with Sarah and the significant moments leading to the betrayal. Each word felt like a dagger, piercing through the remnants of our marriage. Finally, the moment came when I was called to the stand. I stood, my legs shaking slightly as I faced the courtroom. "I never imagined I would be in this position," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "I wanted nothing more than to be a loving husband and father. But Sarah's actions have made me question everything about our life together." "What do you hope to achieve here today?" the judge asked, his gaze unwavering. I hope to protect myself from further deception, I replied, my voice firm. I need to ensure that I'm not held responsible for a child that is not mine. I want to be free from this situation so I can move on. Mr. Mark, the judge said, you mentioned the child is innocent in this matter. Are you prepared to cut ties entirely? I hesitated, the weight of the question sinking in. I am prepared to cut ties from Sarah if that's what it takes. But I also understand that the child is not at fault for this situation. I want to ensure that the child has a safe and healthy upbringing, even if it's without me. The courtroom fell silent, the gravity of my words resonating. I glanced at Sarah, whose face reflected a mixture of regret and despair. The love I once felt was buried beneath the ruins of our shattered relationship. When the judge called for a recess, I stepped down, my heart heavy. I needed time to process everything. As I walked out, I found myself outside the courtroom, the weight of the world on my shoulders. Mark, Claire called, rushing after me. You did well up there, did I? I said, my voice laced with uncertainty. I feel like I just laid my heart on the table, and all I got in return was a judgment. You did what you needed to do. The truth is on your side, she reassured me, her expression earnest. You deserve closure, and we'll get that for you. As I stood there, uncertainty swirling around me, I realized that this confrontation was only the beginning of my journey to reclaim my life. Whatever lay ahead, I knew I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for the child I had grown to care for in spite of everything.